$38 3D printed saddle versus the $300 3D printed saddle. Welcome to the channel. Thank you for tuning to this video. Today we're gonna go over the Ryet 3D printed saddle versus the Fizik Antares versus Evo R1 adaptive saddle. Both are 3D printed saddles. Wanted to see if it's actually worth spending the extra amount of money towards a $300 saddle versus a $38 saddle that you can get off AliExpress. We're gonna dive right into unboxing what this saddle is gonna look like, compare the construction, the weights, my experience on how they feel. Let's dive right into it. Starting off with the Ryet 3D printed saddle, this is the box that you'll receive. On AliExpress, there are lots of sellers, a lot of them that show how many they've sold, a lot of good ratings. This came in pretty quickly, despite the tariffs and all that stuff going on. This is specifically the Ryet 3D printed saddle, 140, 130, 143 super light road carbon saddle. Comes in your cardboard box that flips open. And once you open it, it comes in plastic packaging. Pull it out, and that's pretty much it. But the specs of the Ryet 3D printed saddle, this one is the X6P 3D carbon 3D saddle. It is a full carbon base. The rails are 7x9 carbon, has a 3D printed surface, has a cutout in the middle, and the dimensions is roughly 235 by 140 with an expected weight of 160 grams, plus minus 10. We're gonna weigh it shortly. Just off feel and initial impressions, this seems like a pretty good constructed 3D printed saddle. I don't notice any imperfections, any issues. You can see the carbon layout under, and then the 3D printed design on top. Has a blue Ryet logo at the very back of the saddle, and this is what you can distinguish between other different saddles on AliExpress. What you see in pictures is generally what you will receive. It feels very lightweight, and then off the initial impressions, with the 3D printed material, it is pretty soft. It doesn't take a lot to push in to the material itself. And then it gets thin towards the nose, but a little thicker where you actually need it to be. Diving into this Fizik 3D printed saddle, this one specifically, as mentioned, is the Fizik Antares versus Evo R1 adaptive 3D printed saddle. It has a carbon reinforced nylon shell. It comes in two different sizes, 149 millimeters and 139 millimeters. It has an alloy rail, so not carbon like the Ryet. And then the construction of this one feels really good. I've had this saddle for 1.5 to 2 years now, and it's been my most used saddle. The thing that led me to purchasing the Ryet one was to kind of test out how much of a difference it would be, and if it would be worth buying $300 saddle in the future. So just giving off the impressions of pushing down on the 3D printed material, it is a lot firmer on the inner parts of the 3D material towards the nose, and then it gets softer on the wings or the more extended areas of the saddle. It does all the naming and branding on it, and then on the bottom it also says that this is handmade in Italy. Judging by the looks of the saddles, I do think that the 3D print on the Fizik looks a little bit better. I prefer the cutout of the Ryet saddle. I do prefer a cutout saddle. I think it's a great pressure relief channel compared to the Fizik, even though this one is raised. So this shouldn't cause a huge issue. But if you do have a bike that requires tightening the saddle going through the cutout channel, this might be a better choice compared to this one if you have to squeeze through under. Now, the one thing that I have not noticed or seen on AliExpress with these Ryet saddles is the width. So as mentioned, it is a 140, 143, and I'm assuming it's because this portion of the saddle sticks out a little bit more than here. So 143 millimeters here, and then maybe a little bit less going up or down depending on how you're looking at it. While the Fizik offers up to 149 millimeters. So if you do need a wider saddle, this might be your choice. The biggest I've seen on these Ryet ones or any other Chinese AliExpress 3D printed saddles is roughly 143 millimeters. Most of them are 140. Please correct me if I'm wrong. You might be able to check other brands like Bucklows, which has a specialized clone. That one might have 150, and I've seen some that go up to 160, but you'll have to do your research on that one. Now, diving into the weights of the saddle, I believe this one is marketed around 200 grams, so we'll test that. So 220 grams for the Fizik. And this one, as mentioned from AliExpress, says that it's 160 grams. Plus minus 10, but it actually comes in at 143 grams. So if you want to save about 80 grams, of course this one has more material, just being a wider saddle. A 139 Fizik saddle might be a little bit less. I still don't think it would get to the 143 range, which is pretty impressive for this 3D printed saddle. Another thing I wanted to note is the slopeness of the saddle. So some saddles have a tilt towards the back, which will push your body a little bit forward and lean you into a more aggressive position. But at the end of the day, of course, it depends on the user itself. The Fizik is pretty flat until the back. It does angle up just a bit, while the Ryet one actually has a more angled approach. So this one is going to be a different type of experience. And at the end of the day, saddles are subjective. So someone may prefer this $38 saddle, someone may prefer this $300 saddle, not just because of the names and the pricing of it, but the comfort at the end of the day on how you're riding the bike. The great thing about the Ryet saddle is that you're only spending $38 if you have tax, plus minus whatever that is. You aren't spending too much for a saddle. In addition, they do have a pretty good return policy for some stores on AliExpress. So even if this doesn't work out, I would say maybe after a ride or two and the carbon doesn't look scratched or anything like that, you might have the ability to return it. But for the most part, even if you aren't able to return it, you can always sell this on Facebook Marketplace at a slight loss, just so someone else can take advantage of it. Now for the pricing of the Fizik, this is a $300 saddle. You can generally find them on sale. You can get them used, you can get them on sale through different types of stores. The cheapest I've seen this go down to was $190 on sale for a size 139. And then for a 149, I've seen it maybe go down to about $240. I was lucky enough to pick this up used off Facebook Marketplace. So this is a good saddle if you can get it at a good price. Personally, I don't think I would spend $300 on a saddle like this. I would probably lean towards spending the $38 first. But again, some people might not like 3D printed saddles, so having a traditional saddle might be a better fit for you. All right, after experiencing about 2 weeks of riding with these two saddles, swapped them from my bike going outside, indoor trainer, getting a good feel of both these saddles over the course of about 200 or so miles combined, about 100 each, I can safely say that my personal preference leans towards the Fizik. Now, the reason why is for two things, actually. My sit bones coming into contact with the 3D printed saddle of the Fizik, there's a lot more material here, so it's more comfortable for me. In addition, slopeness of the saddle towards the rear is not as high as the Ryet. So once I tried putting this on, I adjusted it a couple times to see if I can get a good angle with it. And I just could not enjoy the slope or the upwards curve of this particular saddle. Now, if I'm taking into consideration price, build quality, comfort, all those different factors, I highly would recommend this saddle for someone to at least try. For $38, there's not really much you can lose. It's 3D printed. It's not as padded as the Fizik, which is I don't like. It's a little softer on the material, but for some people, if you care about weight, if you care about having a carbon saddle and you want 3D printed, but you don't want to break the bank, I would recommend you picking up this saddle. If I had to buy a saddle again, I most likely would not spend $300 on a 3D printed saddle. I most likely would find a used one on eBay or locally through Facebook Marketplace. I just can't justify spending $300 on a saddle. Now, I know this is a very comfortable saddle. I just would probably lean towards paying $150 for another one of these, or even spending a little more money on a different 3D printed saddle. I'm not gonna go out of my way to try out the other ones on AliExpress. I'm really content with this Fizik one. Initially, this Ryet one was to be purchased to replace this Fizik saddle and eventually sell this one. I will be letting other people try this saddle, whether it be my wife or a couple of friends in my local cycling group, to see if they're interested in this saddle. Now, comment down below which one you guys would prefer. If you guys had experience on both of these saddles, I'm really curious to hear your experiences at the end of the day. Would you spend $300 or buy a used Fizik one or even a specialized one? Or would you prefer spending $38 on a AliExpress saddle? Again, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video, this comparison of these two saddles, my experiences with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.